Hello boys and girls, and this week we're learning about the Egyptians. So we're going to read the chapter and then we're going to answer questions 1 to 5 on fact finding in our copy. So don't forget to put up a title, The Egyptians, in your copies, and don't forget about those capital letters, capital T and capital E for your title. So I'll be watching out for that this week, boys and girls. Okay, and don't forget to use a ruler as well to rule your copy. But we're going to read through the chapter like that, and you're going to basically answer questions 1 to 5, but there's lots of other activities hidden in this chapter as well, so we'll look out for those. So let's read the red box here. Ancient Egypt was one of the most powerful civilizations in history. It grew up along the River Nile and lasted for over 3,000 years. During this time, the Egyptians built huge pyramids, tombs, temples and palaces, many of which are still standing today. In this unit we will learn about how ancient Egypt was formed, who it was ruled by, and some of the things the ancient Egyptians made. So I wonder what that could be. Have you any ideas about what the ancient Egyptians made? And can you name any of the things that they left behind before we read on? So let's have a look at our key words. We have Egyptian, so a person who lived in Egypt, and of course Egyptians still exist today, the country still exists. Nomad, have you ever heard that word before? And have you ever heard it in terms of Ireland? We have our own community of nomads in Ireland, of course, as well. The River Nile, Memphis, Pharaoh, dynasty, so lots of Y's here so far, Palace, Cleopatra, Osiris, Isis, Anubis, Underworld. Now this one's a tricky one. Mummification, Tutankhamun, you might have heard of Tutankhamun before, Pyramid, Hieroglyphics, Scribe, and Papyrus. And like that, feel free to read through the timeline. Do you remember the last time we were talking about BC? Can you remember what BC stands for? Well done. It's before Christ. So ancient Egypt came to an end 30 years, or in and around the time just before Christ, so 30 years before Christ. So 30 years after that would have been around the birth of Jesus. Okay, so we're going to read about the first Egyptians. The first Egyptians were nomads. Nomads are people who move around a lot and don't stay in a single place. I wonder why that is. Why do nomads not stay in a single place? These nomads eventually settled on the banks of the River Nile. The soil around the Nile was rich and good for growing crops. People began to farm the land and build villages along the river. Over time, they formed two kingdoms, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. And if you have a look at the map there, boys and girls, you'll see we have Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Now, Lower Egypt is at the top of our picture and Upper Egypt is at the bottom. Now, I wonder why that is. And you've got a clue here with the river. So, this is the River Nile. But let's remember that rivers flow towards the sea. So we know that this river flows this way. So we can imagine that the Upper Egypt is called that because it's on higher ground than Lower Egypt. Here we have what's called sea level. So the River Nile flows down towards sea level. So hence the terms Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Around 2900 BC, a king named Menes joined the two parts of Egypt into one civilization. In the centre, Menes built the capital city of Memphis. This was the beginning of the rule of pharaohs. So think about it. Why do you think the nomads could not stay in one place? And it's something we've read about before, of course, I think in the Stone Age chapter. Okay, so we're going to read about the pharaohs. ancient Egyptians called their kings and queens pharaohs. And be careful of the spelling of that in your copies when you're answering questions, boys and girls. Egyptians often thought of the pharaoh as a god on earth. Pharaohs were part of a dynasty. A dynasty is a powerful family who rule an area for many years. When one pharaoh died, another family member became the next pharaoh. Pharaohs lived in palaces. An Egyptian palace was a group of buildings made from mud and bricks. They were heavily guarded and had many rooms for storing things. They also had living areas with bedrooms, dining rooms, and gardens. Most pharaohs were men, but there were some women too. Hatshepsut, or I don't know if you can pronounce that any better than I can, boys and girls, was pharaoh from around 1473 BC to 1458 BC. She often dressed in men's clothes, and I wonder why that was, boys and girls, can you tell me? Cleopatra was the most famous female pharaoh of Egypt. She was also the last pharaoh. And of course, you can find out 3 facts about Cleopatra. You can do some research on that with somebody in your family. So, let's read about religion. Religion was very important to the ancient Egyptians. They believed in lots of different gods. These gods could take many forms, usually as animals. Some of the most important gods were Osiris, Isis, and Anubis. Osiris was ruler of the underworld, the land of the dead. Isis looked after women and children and healed the sick. Anubis protected the gates to the underworld. He was usually shown as having the head of a jackal. Ancient Egyptians believed that life continued after death. They preserved the dead using mummification. All organs except for the heart were removed from the body and kept in jars. Ooh. The bodies were then wrapped in linen bandages. That's definitely a horrible history there, boys and girls. Let's read a little bit about Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun is one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs. In 1922, his tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings by an archaeologist named Howard Carter. So, boys and girls, I wonder, do you know what an archaeologist does? The tomb was filled with many treasures, including statues, jewellery, chariots, board games, and paintings. So I wonder why the tomb was filled with those kind of type things. Not just treasures, as you might imagine, but board games as well. Tutankhamun became a pharaoh when he was just 9 years old. You know, you're 9 years old as well, boys and girls, so that's a very young age to become king. But he died at the age of 18. For years, people thought he was murdered. Now, after examining Tutankhamun's body with medical scans, scientists believe he died from an infection in his leg. Such a simple thing these days, boys and girls. But back in those days, obviously that was a bit more complicated, and I wonder why that was as well, do you think? Why was it that he died from such a simple thing that would be easy to fix today, wouldn't it? Let's read about the tombs and pyramids of Egypt. Ancient Egyptians built enormous pyramids. They were used as burial places and as a way to honour the pharaohs. The Egyptians also built huge tombs. Pharaohs were buried along with their many riches and treasures. They believed that they could bring their treasures with them into the next life. Sometimes fake rooms were built to try and trick people who tried to break into the tombs and rob them, because of course they knew that they were full of treasure. The pyramids were built by thousands of workers over many years. Historians do not know exactly how they were built. It was most likely that the workers cut up large blocks and moved them using ramps. There are over 100 pyramids in Egypt today. The largest is the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built around 2560 BC. For almost 4,000 years, it was the tallest human-made building in the world. And here we have a picture of it here, and you can see people beside it, so you can just see how absolutely massive it is. Something I'd love to see one day. And this is the most interesting part of the chapter for me, reading about hieroglyphics. This is something I was fascinated with when I was your age. And like that, feel free to do further research on any part of the chapter that we've read so far. Ancient Egyptians used hieroglyphics to write. Hieroglyphics is a form of writing that uses pictures and symbols instead of letters and words. Hieroglyphics are very old and were first used around 3000 BC. Learning to write using hieroglyphics took a very long time. The people who trained to write in hieroglyphics were called scribes. Most people in ancient Egypt could not read or write. This meant that the job of a scribe was very important. The Egyptians wrote on tablets, iPads? No, clay blocks, and walls. They also wrote on a type of paper called papyrus. This was made from a reed-like plant that grew around the River Nile. Some ancient Egyptian writing has been preserved on stone, clay, and papyrus over thousands of years. Historians use this writing to learn more about life in ancient Egypt. So let's just read the hieroglyphics. Oh, I can't read hieroglyphics actually. But do you recognise any of the images in the hieroglyphics? And write down as many as you can. And like that, I know some of you out there who are so artistic will probably draw some hieroglyphics as well. You could have a go maybe at translating or writing something in hieroglyphics if you did a little bit of research on it. So fact file, Thoth was the god of wisdom and the scribes. So they had a god for writing as well. Okay, so having read the chapter, you're going to read out the chapter as well, and you can feel free to go back in the video and read along with me. Pause the video where you need to in order to answer the questions, but I'll give you a little bit of help here as well. So, like that, your title is The Egyptians and Fact Finding. So question 1, what type of people were the first Egyptians? So, let's go back to the paragraph where we read about the first Egyptians. And do we remember? Yeah, here we go. The first Egyptians. And the answer, of course, is here. The first Egyptians were. And it's looking for a specific answer there, isn't it? Or a specific word, rather. So question 2. Oh, excuse me. Question 2. What did ancient Egyptians call their kings and queens? So like that, let's skim and scan the chapter for the word kings and queens. It's at the very top of the next page. I see the word kings and queens, and just here then we'll have our answer. And again, there's a specific word there, a PH word that makes the F sound, of course. Question 3. Where was Tutankhamun's tomb found? And like that, I remember seeing a picture of Tutankhamun back in the chapter, so let's go back and see if we can find that picture and read around that. Now, so, and it's asking us then, where was Tutankhamun's body found? So, and you see the name of a place, it was actually over here on our map as well. Just a little clue for you. Okay, let's have a look at question 4. What is the name of the largest pyramid in Egypt? And I don't have to go searching very far for this answer. Hint. Question 5. Who were the people who trained to write using hieroglyphics? And like that, I mentioned it was my favourite part of the chapter, the part that I find the most interesting. Reading about hieroglyphics, and who were the people who were trained? I can see that phrase right there. Who were the people who were trained to write hieroglyphics? And it was one of our key words, of course, as well. So very best of luck with that. Best handwriting. Don't forget to put capitals at the start of every sentence in your copy as well. And like that, I look forward to seeing some of the research that you've done on this as well, boys and girls, because I know that some of you will be really interested in this topic. So very best of luck with that, and I look forward to seeing all of your work on Seesaw.